Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, where, as always, we fling open the doors of your local comic book shop and bring you interviews with your favorite comic book creators of yesterday and today. I'm Joe Marcello, and today I am beyond excited and thrilled to be bringing you this latest episode. We have one returning guest and one brand spanking new guest together. We're talking about none other than Guy Dorian and the great Larry Hama. That's right. One of the men who basically shaped our comic book childhood in presenting G.I. Joe, amongst others like Wolverine and Deadpool. He's had an amazing career. Today, however, we're talking about his latest venture with Guy Dorian, a series called MOUNTIES vs. Werewolves. We get into the Kickstarter, what the series is about, how they got to where they are today, and their plans going forward. So without further ado, let's get to the interview. This is Guy Dorian and Larry Hama.
It's nice to be here. It's very nice to be asked to be on, and I appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure. We're both huge fans of the both of you, and we heard about your project that you guys have working on, Mounties versus Werewolves. So just the title alone, we were in. So that being said, I'll kick it off rather than our standard question. And basically, let's start at the beginning. How did this project come together?
Actually, I started putting it together over 10 years ago. I had some good old friend in Canada who said, hey, you know, the Canadian TV is looking for all sorts of material, but it has to be, native Canadian stuff, and I thought I could develop this through him and maybe make it work. And he sort of just, slid away from it after a while, but I thought it was a good premise, and wasn't necessarily specifically for Canadian television. I thought it could, work just as well elsewhere. And I developed all the characters and did a rough outline of the series, and just kept noodling at it these years. And then when I started working with Jesus, I'm having a Biden moment.
A Biden moment. Well,
I guess it's better than having a Trump moment.
Well, Larry and I have been working together. Larry and I have been working together for a little while, doing different things for other here and there on other projects here and there, and we've known each other for a good amount of years now. Actually, met. I think we had a lot of mutual friends, and Bob Camp and Herb Trimpe and people like that. And so we started doing some stuff together with some other company. And the one thing about Larry, it's like, as far as writers and stuff are concerned, I've worked with a lot of people, a lot of big names. I've worked on big projects. I've worked with 20th Century Fox. I've worked at Marvel. I've worked at all these different companies, the biggest toy companies, everything like that. But one thing I never got a chance to really work with Larry, but I saw his scripts and stuff because, many years ago, I started as an assistant, and I saw with Larry stuff being written and drawn, and I was assisting on some of that stuff. And then as I was working at Marvel, everyone always talked about Larry. And then I saw the Wolverine stuff he had done, and works with Silvestri and stuff. And Larry is this guy that is very much in line with the things that I do, the people I know, the kind of work that I do, the martial arts background with me. And I know people all around the world, and I did martial arts for many years, and I kept hearing about Larry Hama and his swords and all this stuff. And I was like, I got to work with that guy. at some point. He is such a, I don't know what it is. Nothing he does is boring. Every time I get to see something about his, I go, all right, where's this going? Then I go, oh my gosh. You see, the thing about Larry is Larry can take whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, I've talked to other people because I also ink and stuff like that about, hey, what is it? You know, what can you know when you're at a certain level of perception? I'll say perception. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You could just, you know, whatever the premise is, you could make it work. You could make it great. And Larry has that kind of a thing, you know. It's never boring. It's never dull, and he can conceive of characters and stories and plots and stuff. And you still get characters, you get story, you get the human condition, but you also get this freaking awesome action
Right.
in almost any genre.
It's all Neil Adams' fault, you know. You know, in 1972, he told me one piece of advice that I've never forgotten, and it's the key to all my success. Is that he said, no matter what it is, never admit that you don't know how to do it. You know?
That's why I said I can do Google Meetings. I just didn't know I couldn't do it.
You know, and he said, yeah, you know, like, you know, if they call you up and say, hey, well, can you do, flying saucers, or can you do dinosaurs? Can you, you know, or, you know, just always say yes, you know, and then figure out how to do it. You know, I did this in the theater. You know, they would, you know, right. Can you sing and dance? Well, sure.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. Yeah.
You know, I faked my way through, a Stephen Sondheim musical on Broadway.
Wow.
You know, when they put the opening number together, the Patricia Birch, the choreographer, she was the choreographer on Grease and dozens of big productions. She pointed at me and two other guys who were professional acrobatic dancers.
Okay.
And she said, okay, you three guys are the same height. So I want you in this group together. And when the curtain opens, it'll just be you three, and I'll feed in everybody else. So you got to hold it all together. You know? Wow. And I turned to the two guys next to me and said, I'm not a dancer. You know, I don't do any of this stuff. And one guy turned to me and he said, oh, don't worry, just do what we do. And so I did. And, you know, I had to go home every night and practice for hours and hours, but I managed to get through it.
Yeah.
You know, so
that's the artist in Larry. You know, that's
I don't. I got into the business because I wanted to do funny animals. You know, I was a Carl Barks fan. I wanted to do, you know, Uncle Scrooge, but you know, they weren't doing that. You know, it was just superheroes.
Yeah,
I had to do what was available work wise, and you know, the last thing I wanted to do was military stuff.
Right.
That was offered. You know, I've famously said a million times that if they had offered me Barbie, I would have taken Barbie.
Wow.
But would Barbie have guns then?
I was going to say,
yeah, no kung fu grip on Barbie. Don't worry.
Well, no, I would have done Barbie.
Right.
You know, right. You know. In all those years that, you know, I was at Marvel, I kept saying, well, why aren't we doing comics for girls? You know, and girls used to be 50% of the market, 50%. Yeah. You know, people don't realize that both Jack Kirby and Johnny Romita and all those guys all did romance comics.
Yeah.
Right. They did tons of romance comics before, and then they had to switch to doing superheroes.
Right.
Anyway, I got off the topic.
I don't know.
No, I don't know.
I was because Guy, you pretty much answered the question I had for you, but Larry, I'm wondering with you, what did Guy bring to the table for this project that you said, okay, this is the right person to work with me? Because you said he'd been working on this for 10 years. Why was Guy the right guy?
He wanted to do it. He's enthusiastic, and he's a doer. He's not a talker and a BS artist. He gets the job done. He produces stuff.
Right.
I really had it with people who are who talk a good game, but they just can't deliver anything on their end. Unfortunately, I go into a name circle with his name because I want to pronounce it Guy.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Larry's got a point there, because my name actually is Guy.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah. My father's from France.
Everybody calls him Guy.
My bad.
Yeah. See, my father's from France. My family's from France, and it was Guy. I was literally named after a Frenchman, not even just a French name, but a French man. So, so my father wanted to name me Guy. It was the only proviso he had when I was going to be a twin, because I have a twin brother, identical twin. So my father said, "Nope, the one that I want is Guy." And we were in my mom's belly, and I was going to come first. They knew it, and so he's like, "That one's mine. That one's Guy." But yeah, it's whenever I talk to anyone in Canada, they always say, "Oh, Guy."
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, and Larry knows a lot of that.
In Eastern Canada.
Yeah, you see, Larry can correct me on like exact. He can say where exactly. He knows the thing. The one thing about working with Larry, this is one of the things. I've worked with everybody, right? And I like to produce stuff, like Larry said. And if I say I'm going to produce it, I make it happen as best as I can. It'll happen. People will get paid. The work will come out. It'll be drawn. It'll be inked. It'll be whatever. When it comes out, who knows? This one, that one. That's not my job. Who does who? If I'm working for a company, that's why I decided to make this company, so I could control that myself. And I have all the people. I'm very good at that. I'm very good at getting things to go and to happen and to be a real thing. Like Larry said, the thing is, when you work in this industry, Larry and I are always going to get people saying, "You know what? I want you to do this. I want you to work on that. Hey, we thought you would do this, and we wanted." And I got this story, and you're like, usually who actually does this stuff, who will actually bring it to fruition. And so we've heard it so many times about people who say they're going to do stuff, that wasting our time on stuff like that just doesn't make any sense, especially as we get older. And Larry's older than I am, but I'm still old enough where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to waste my time on it. That's why, part of the reason of working together is just that I know I can do it. I know Larry will. Okay, so it's called Mounties vs. Werewolves. You can give Mounties vs. Werewolves or Mounties vs. Man to 5 different people.
Right.
But when Larry does it, there's no chance it's not going to have all these. Yeah, I mean, it's in 1922, so it's a period piece. Larry sends me, "Hey, this gun, that gun." I don't know that stuff. I can draw anything, but I don't know what it is. So I'm kind of like, well, the way Larry is, you got to be that same way. Hey, somebody gives it to you, you do the work to make it happen. You might miss something here or there, but eventually you get it done.
Right.
And that kind of a thing is like, hey, it's also like it's something that Larry can do. Everyone can't do that. He could just go, and he knows all that stuff. He knows, the time period. He knows the weapons. He knows about, this is just after World War One. He knows about Canadian Mounties. He knows about Canada. He knows geography. He knows, that kind of stuff isn't necessarily what I know. I just know how to draw well and do all the other stuff. Makes, like Larry said, make stuff happen. As Walter just wrote up something about me, and in his comment he wrote, guy's one of the hardest working guys in the industry, and he could get stuff done. So it's a that, and I really like Larry. He's a great guy.
I just want to piggyback on that for a second, because talking about the detail that Larry brings to a project, we're talking to Gregory Wright, and he was saying when he was working with you on the Nom, you said the way that the boots, the way the laces were tied, had to be a certain way, because you said the veterans who are reading this comic would pick up on that, and you wanted to make it as authentic as possible. I think it's that kind of detail that you bring to a book that it shows how much you love, and how the passion that you have for these things.
Well, like Mies van der Rohe said, God lives in the details.
Yeah.
And there's comic book fans basically are sort of, well, instinctively anal.
Yes. A bit.
And they fall into a number of different categories. There's continuity freaks, and then there are, the canon, strict canon guys.
Right.
And it runs the gamut, but there's always a focus on the details and stuff.
Right. Yeah, the authenticity. Yeah, I've been personally, once I got it, I started trying to research what anything I could find, and what I found was very helpful. Larry sent me some images and stuff like that. What I found was kind of helpful was there are old films out there shot during the 40s and such about the 20s. And the 50s, 40s, 50s, shot about that era, and some in Canada. And I was like, oh, wow, they did all the work. I have the reference now. So, but it's interesting because it's like, you think about the 1920s, right? But the house that I live in is 40 years old. It's like 20 something years old. Mm-hmm. So there's buildings in New York that are from the turn of the century. And you go, wow, those are quite old, and buildings. So when you think of the 20s, every structure wasn't built in the 20s, right? Every piece of clothing that someone wore wasn't just bought at the store. If it's 1922, they might have owned it for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so like there's a character, Tullaby Bradshaw, who wears a greatcoat from the trenches of World War One. Is this correct, Larry? I'm pretty sure I got that right. Mm-hmm. And that would have been time period, was that with 1915? 12 Larry, World War One
ended 18.
Mm-hmm. Ended in 18. So it would have been from prior. So doing research in that way is something that I figured out can help too. Is like you look at the time of that era, which I'm doing for this, the time, within 10 years prior, because people still had shirts and clothes, and they didn't have all these giant stores like this where you could buy clothes every week or every month. It wasn't necessarily like that. And then just a bit afterward, because people would still have worn stuff from 22 4 years later. You see what I'm saying? Or driven a car or whatever it was, horses, and so that kind of stuff really helps. But that's one of the things that really made me excited about what Larry had written, because it's a period piece. And I know for an artist who doesn't know that period, it's not easy. And I don't know all that history like Larry. But like Larry said, you just got to go, you jump in to the waters, you pinch your nose and you jump in and you do it. And that's that's kind of I never looked back. You know, Larry said, I want to do Manny's vs. Werewolves. It took a little while for me to be able to get everything in order because I have to get everyone involved. I have to create the campaign. I have to get everything going. I have to create graphics, everything that's involved in it, plus still do other stuff that pays my mortgage. And then I can, you know, put it together. But I think things happen at the right time, and and I will get them done. No matter what, I will get them done. So we got a great cast of covers as well, by J.K. Woodward, by myself, well, Larry Layout, my pencils and inks. We got Kevin Conrad over me on a cover. Let's see, Sal Buscema, I think I said that. So we got J.K. Woodward, Sal Buscema, Mark Spears, Kelly Jones, Kevin Conrad. I'm checking my list here to make sure I don't forget anybody. Scott Hanna did a cover. We have a colorist, Candace Hahn, who's very good. She does a lot of horror. And just a really great crew of people. A really great crew of people.
I wanted to ask, and I think you've pretty much answered it at this point, but there's so many people involved, clearly. But what is the creative process like for the two of you as it pertains to this project?
I'll say something really quick, and then I'll let Larry take over because he's the one writing and everything. Usually when I work with Larry, he writes the story out as thumbnails. I'm not sure if that's what he's going to do here, but it works well. I can illustrate anything, obviously. But Larry, because Larry can draw, right? It's very different. It's a very different thing. Now he doesn't have to, he could just give me thumbnails. But the thing is Larry has structure, form. He knows when he wants someone to talk, and he's writing it. It's a very rare thing that, you get to work with a writer who can lay out a page, so usually the process is Larry will do thumbnails, he sends it to me, and then I take it, and I usually keep every panel the same. I might change something around a little bit here and there, but one thing I've learned is that if you have a writer who can tell a story with pencil in any way, it's incredibly, it's so much better because you really get their vision. And with Larry and I it's like any layout that I could do or anyone else on the planet, they won't be able to do it better than Larry. It just doesn't make any sense because Larry tells the story better than anybody. So that's usually the process. And then I take it and I do my due diligence and pencil the shit out of that. And, then usually have one of my inkers take over whoever's involved. And Larry can tell you about his process with the writing and how he plans on doing it and such.
Yeah, well, that basically, the way I've always worked is the image comes first. I never identified as a writer, and in fact, I have very few writers as friends. Actually, all my friends are people who draw. That's my tribe. Because I don't think of the stories in words. I try to see the entire story as a series of images, like a silent movie. And then I just pick the best frames from that movie. And I go from there. So I had to make the entire story work as a series of images. And that's when I'm writing a plot and not doing breakdowns for an artist. All I'm doing at the word processor is describing the images I see in my head. Dialogue and words come dead last. I don't use captions. I've never used captions. I mean, the captions I use are meanwhile in Washington or the next day. You know?
Mm.
This comes from, this horrible incident when I was doing a job for Marvel. I spent an entire day drawing a big interior splash panel of these characters walking through the Himalayas.
Mhm.
And I meticulously drew in the whole mountain range and like birds flying through the valleys and beams of sunlight streaming through the clouds between the mountain rifts.
Mhm.
And the writer covered it all up with about 9 captions. And all the captions did was describe all the stuff that was covered up in the captions.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. It's something. It's something.
And this is when I was first starting out at Marvel. I was making $23 a page for the finished pencils.
Wow.
And this writer was making $50 a page. And he was writing 66 to 88 pages a week.
Wow.
Okay. And I could barely do a page a day, and he would had me plots that said, oh, and then the main character goes into the such and such building, and between the ground floor and the top floor, he meets this guy, this villain with this specific weapon, and no, between the first floor and the top floor, he encounters all these traps, and then he gets to the top floor and he encounters this villain. That was the entire plot that was given to me, and he was paid for that. Okay, I had to basically create the whole story, right? And this guy is making literally 50,000% more than I, or something. Wow. I mean, it was a ridiculous number, and buying, big houses in Pennsylvania and whatever. And I was like, man, something's wrong with this picture. And to make matters worse, at that time, writers were given a percentage of the original pages. Wow. This was because all the editors were writers.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And it was, and the artists were just considered hired hands.
Jeez.
By them. But, I could see that, hey, Kirby and Ditko were doing far more than, just filling in the pages, and so was I. And I said, oh man, I got to get into this racket, and I tried for like 15 years to get writing work from Marvel. Yeah. Nobody would give me any writing work because they said, oh, you can't write. You're an artist. And besides, if they gave me writing work, they'd be spitting in their own wallets. Right. Okay. They didn't want the artists to start writing their own stuff.
Right. The editors love writing their own stuff.
It was crazy. And that was the only reason I got to write G.I. Joe, was that Hasbro came to Marvel and wanted this comic done. And Jim Shooter asked every contract writer and every non-contract writer at Marvel, and they all refused to do it because at that time a toy license book was the bottom of the barrel. The licensing fee came off the top of the page rate, so you got paid a lot less. So no A-list or B-list or even a C-list creator in their right mind would work on a toy book. That's why you got pure crap on all the license books, right?
Except for G.I. Joe.
I was just interested in getting my foot in the door as a writer. And like I said before, if they had offered me Barbie, I would have taken Barbie. Right. So I took G.I. Joe and I decided, well, I'm going to do this to the hilt, And within a year and a half, it was the #1 selling book in the country.
And he had the perfect guy in Herbie,
Yeah,
because Herbie was also ex-military as well.
and Herbie, Herbie loves to draw airplanes. So
Yeah.
whenever that was one of the first things I learned as a writer was that I always asked the artist what they like to draw.
Okay.
And I made a list of what they like to draw, and I gave them tons of it.
Right. That kind of goes over here too. I'm a monster illustrator. I'm a character designer and monster illustrator, but I love drawing monsters. I draw monsters better than I draw anything else. So it fits for me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's but with the success of GI Joe, I went back to Marvel and I said, "Well, look, doesn't this prove anything?" And oh no, it's a fluke. It's not, that doesn't really count. So
That's
and I kept bugging them for another book to write. And they said, "Well, we're going to cancel this book because this other book because it's on. The sales are going way down." And I said, "Well, what book is that?" And they said, "It's Wolverine." And because it had been doing so bad, they didn't care what I did with it. They just gave me free reign. So, and within a year and a half, it was like the number 2 selling book in the country. And I went back the third time and I said, "Well, doesn't that prove anything?" So, "Oh, well, Wolverine doesn't count. He's the most unusual character in X-Men. He doesn't really fit in there, so it's a fluke."
Right.
A lot of flukes.
Yeah. So I was never offered a book at Marvel that was an A-list book while it was an A-list book.
Right.
And so when I went back to the well the third time, they said, "Well, there's another book we were thinking about canceling. It's called The Avengers." So I took that on. But the thing is, to this date, I was never offered an A-list book.
Yeah.
At Marvel.
I would say that Larry turned everything into A-list, though. And it's not just because of reading anything or such like that. It's just that you could tell quality. The thing about being in our industry, when you're a comic creator, right? When you're a creator who can do stories, there is a vast amount of creation, right, out there. Meaning, there's a lot of stuff already created, right? But what can you draw from? And it's been like Larry has this knowledge of so much stuff, but he knows how to put different pieces together. From all different types of things. And the best plots and stories are simple ones. They're not like complex things. They're ingestible and they're understandable. But then taking those and finding the hook in them. When I draw something, I have to draw certain things. And I go, okay, I could sketch out the werewolf and he's sort of profile. But where is the hook in this drawing? It might be the way I use the lighting that changes the drawing and creates an atmosphere or something like that, or the way the character's eye is or something. Right. And that's the thing with Larry. He can take these stories and he can go beyond what a lot of people that I've seen do in that respect, where he could take something that, you could give to somebody. And this is what he's kind of talking about. It's like, he created hits out of that stuff. The things that were hits from when he did them and how he does them and how he continues to do it is like this book, I believe, will be a big hit. Is that he can take it to a place where he knows how to find hooks. He knows how to understand how to explore and grow something. And it's the premise. It's not overly done, but then he takes it and he puts all that stuff in there that brings it to this other level, right, and creates an entire world.
A lot of times they would just ask me to do something and I knew nothing about it. I mean, they said, "Oh, can you do Venom for a while?" And I said, "I've never read a Venom." I said, "Well, give it a stab." And and I read a few issues, and I said, "Oh, okay, I can get into this," and I got into it.
Mm-hmm.
When I got up to issue 88 of Wolverine, they said, "Oh, you got it. There's this character we want you to insert into the, you know, uh, uh, it's an interesting character called Deadpool." so, so I wrote the first encounter between Deadpool and Wolverine.
Wow.
How'd that ever pan out? No.
Yeah, I in the last few months, I've signed hundreds and hundreds of copies of that issue and I'd never seen a copy show up before. Stuff like that. I only had like 2 issues or 3 issues with Deadpool in it to like figure out where he was coming from, but you know. He's so exact a character. It's really easy. He's all there.
Right.
I think Rob did a really good job of putting that character together because almost anybody can take that character and not mess it up.
Right.
And there's very few characters that are like that. And because people are always tempted to like put their own fingerprint on something, and 9 times out of 10 that like messes it up.
Yeah, the original, when you do as a character illustrator, and concept artist, and a character designer, when you've got it, when it's simple but it does the job perfectly, and anyone can draw it. Anyone can do it. Anyone can understand it. It's when lots of times in like a lot of, if you go to Superman, if you put him in his costume he had from the past, he works. You put Batman in the costume he had, it works. You know what I'm saying? That these characters like that, you can do all kinds of things with them, but really you're not improving the character. You're just doing an alternate version of that character. But the original character concept, and at that time, especially when those things were coming out and those characters were coming out, that's exactly what Larry was saying. It's like they did what they were supposed to as a character design, and you really don't need to go anywhere after that. And it's just anything else is just what somebody feels like doing with it.
Well, a good example of that is like look at Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man is not a character design. Okay,
right?
That's what's recognizable about him. He's a body language design, which is all from Steve Ditko.
Right.
I mean, if Spider-Man isn't like doing this, it's not Spider-Man. So you can change the costume to whatever you want, but as long as he's still doing the body language and the gestures, which is like 100% Ditko.
Right.
It's Spider-Man. And that's an incredible act of creation. Yeah.
Well, speaking of creating characters, Larry, with this book, what was your process for putting a character together? How do you blueprint it? Because I know you mentioned it's very visual, but is it a look of the character? Is it a personality characteristic, or an ability? How do you begin building a character?
Well, I thought, for a Mountie in that period, I figured a guy like that would have served in the trenches in World War One. And so I figured, okay, he's an officer. He was an officer in Flanders. He's had shell shock. He was like damaged by that experience, like the huge majority of the participants in World War One were. And he comes back, and he's back in the RCMP, and he's offered this assignment, way out, in northern Alberta, and he gets out there, and he discovers that this is not a normal posting. It's a secret Canadian government operation where there are these werewolves up there that have come that it came over at the time of Evangeline. They're like they came over with the Huguenots.
Oh, wow.
So they're like French in origin.
Mm-hmm.
And and instead of like staying in the more populous areas of Eastern Canada,
mm-hmm.
they went further west, so to avoid detection.
Mm-hmm.
But the secret agency is tasked with keeping them there because they don't want them spreading southwards into areas where there's big population centers and cities,
mm-hmm.
and all that. And they don't want the population panicking. So there's these small enclaves of Mounties up there trying to keep the werewolf population down. And so I had to figure out, who these other Mounties are,
mm-hmm.
and the locals,
mm-hmm.
And I figured some of the locals are natives, and looking into the history of natives in Canada at that time, I started reading about these the special schools that the Canadian government would take native children and send them off to these they call them residential schools,
mm-hmm.
where they were, made into like white people, mm-hmm. And it was a way of, well, it was out and out cultural genocide. It was a way of, taking away all their culture. Mm-hmm. And I figured, well, I had to deal with that in some way. So I made one of the characters, come from one of those schools. Mm-hmm. But I also sent him to World War One, and so he goes to World War One as a sniper in the trenches, and he comes back, and he's got all those issues too, but he's back in his original homeland, mm-hmm. and he's on a sort of a mission to get rid of the werewolves on his own. And sometimes that clashes with the Mounties mission. Right? Mm-hmm. So there are other native characters. There are, characters who are not indigenous, but, local to that area. A Chinese grocer, mm-hmm. and a brothel, things like that, so there's a wide variety of characters, mm-hmm. to play with, who have their own backstories, and my methodology is to make these backstories, come to the surface gradually. Right. So we get hints, and then maybe a whole episode about one. But I can't really explain real structure because I've never written an outline in my life. I write each story page by page. I do not know what happens on page 5 until I get to page 4. Huh. When I had to do the silent issue of G.I. Joe number 21 because an issue went missing or something. I had to come up with an issue that they knock out in 2 weeks, basically, from start to finish. So I said, well, if I got rid of all the dialogue, it doesn't have to be lettered. I can, and in those days, it took a week to get a book lettered. So I said, okay, I'll write it and draw it at the same time. And I said, I'll do like breakdowns and Steve Lalo will do finishes. And I did all the breakdowns in 3 days over a long weekend, and sent them off to Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And he fed them back. They were colored as they came in, and that book went out the door in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Which wasn't the record, though. I think the record was me and Howie Chaykin and Vinnie Coletta. We did a James Bond adaptation in a week, from having nothing to having the book go out to the printer.
For your eyes only?
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. And the thing was, nobody could tell the difference.
That's awesome.
Guy, I wanted to ask you about your art, and specifically what kind of mood and tension did you want to create with your art for this project?
Well, it kind of sells itself. I'm a huge horror fan. If you looked around, if you could see the rest of my studio, you could see that I have horror everywhere.
Which I can appreciate.
So, number one, my brain is wired that way. It's a funny thing, I worked with John and Sandy Carpenter at their company for like 5 years on different projects. But it's hard for people sometimes to see you as someone who they think is a superhero guy and stuff like that. And then you go, well, I could do horror. I could do that, and the people, usually like, no, we'll get the horror guy for that. I'm like, yeah, but the horror guy probably wants to draw a cartoon and I want to draw horror. I could say that I do my research every day almost, because I watch something horror every day. Mm-hmm. And every Friday night, my wife and I sit down and we watch a horror movie.
That's awesome.
I know that stuff, and it's about lighting. It's you could change any scene into a different scene with music, with lighting, with color, with Larry mentioned body language. Body language is a big one, So like you can have a werewolf, or you can have a werewolf, and it's very different. You could have a person sitting there, or you can have a person sitting there. It's different. So it will be body language, it will be lighting, and it'll be the whole tone of it. For me, I get into that and I go, what is it? The black shadows and black, the darkness plays a role. Things you can't see are scary. Small places. Now, I'll probably have a discussion with Larry about some of my thought processes on that, but he, of visuals, just to let him know what some of my thought processes and intentions are eventually. Because the one thing about this is we're not intending on just doing a book and then running away. We're going to create a series here. It's going to be a whole world, as we go along. And you could tell too, it's just like, I never create something that's just a book. I go to an entire series and an entire world, an entire universe. And Larry's already, when you listen to what Larry was saying about how he develops each character, they have their own backstory. This creates the place where Larry can go, hey, I have this. All these stories are out there now for these characters. We're going to have them all together. But they each have their own life that they live and their own story. And at some point, we can pull out to that story. Now, it's a horror. So that means that it will remain that way. It's, you know what I'm saying? We will keep that vibe. It's going to be a Blumhouse. It's going to be one of those things, it's going to have that look. But I think Shadow is a character in it. Character body structure is a character itself. Towns are a character itself. A cabin's not just a cabin; it's a cabin with a lot of shadows. a lot of textures. So for me going in, uh, we have a preview that's going to be coming out of some of the stuff. Um, by the way, it's in pre-launch right now, so everyone could go look for Mounties vs. Werewolves online, or go to Larry's page, or Larry. I've been faking it all my life. Hama page, and you could get the links, or go to my link. But the keeping in mind that I love this stuff and I want to do it right. I want to do Larry right. But black shadows, lighting, the what you don't see, textures, a lot of textures, werewolf hair, texture in the skin. So it won't just be, oh, I draw a cabin and the wall is clean looking. This is why horror, many times, you can use characters, you can use artists and creators who draw in that fashion, or know what they need to do with it. You can have a scratchier line, because what that scratchier line is, rather than every line perfectly clear, is the texture. And that actually is a part of the visual that creates that feeling when you look at it. You drop in some heavy shadows, textures coming out of the shadows, and that creates it. In films, you might see, and I do all these things. So when Larry's writing it, I'll be talking to the colorist. Hey, this is the way the scheme should look, and I'll put together a palette with the colorist and have a discussion with them. Again, I don't just draw; I create all the stuff. My part of it is doing everything else. Right. So what I do is I don't micromanage, but I manage everything. I art direct, color direct, and I make sure that the whole piece comes together. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'll let people do what they want to do, but then I'll go in and I'll say, hey, listen, I want you to take a look at this film, and then I'll give them pointers like, hey, you're going to use a high contrast lighting, right? Or pay attention that I used a high contrast lighting here, and we want a few colors here. So we're going to focus. We're going to put something red underneath or by the character. That character is now going to pop out. We want to use some other tones. We're going to get some violets, and then we're going to put some yellow reflected tones next to those violets. You see what I'm saying? And now we're getting that color, and we're going to have a little green somewhere, but not pushing too much, just to complement the red, right? But creating this atmosphere and the look. A colorist can't just color something that's blue. It doesn't work that way in horror. Everything is affected by these tones. And a way to look at it is like Creepshow. Creepshow had the blue and red light, or some people saw it as green and red light. And you go, well, what is that? That is its own character. That's its own thing. That's its own hook. That tells you this is horror. Now, you don't always have to do something so shocking, but as far as Creepshow is concerned, the idea for that was that it was a comic book come to life. So those things occur that way in certain scenes, and then they actually showed comic book pages. So for instance, over here, I have the initial cover, and it has these blues and it has reds, and this isn't the most vibrant image. You can see that online, but it'll have these tones and it'll have this mood. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make sure, as an art director and as an illustrator, and talking to the inker about those textures, because my inkers, like let's say Kevin Conrad, fantastic, but I know that Kevin worked on Kiss Psycho Circus, and it was basically a horror. And you go, okay, this guy knows how to use shadows. He knows how to do lines. He can make any line crisp, but he knows when to use some spatter and some texture. So, I'll sit down with him as we really get deep into it. And I'll say, hey, man, I want you to utilize textures. And I'm going to show you what I mean. And then I'll send him examples of it. I have a background also in film, like Larry. I was on TV and stuff like that, on things, and World War II stuff and things like that, and other things. But that knowing about that in photography, learning about that, a lot of people don't realize that those things can play a factor, understanding those things. Because I want it, Larry's writing something that is, even though it's a comic, it's going to have the feelings, and it's going to be easily translatable and transferable to film and television. That's the one thing. Like when I choose projects, I have another one called Lost Landers that's coming out that I'm working on right now with Louise Simonson, Walter Simonson, and a host of other greats, Sal Buscema. And that's a toy project made for collectors who wish they saw this in the 80s and they must have missed it. But then for kids as well, one thing Sal said to me, he goes, kids can't go to the comic shop anymore and really get what the way they did back in the day. I miss that. I miss kids coming to me with their comics. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the things that I'm doing with that, but I know what that is. Lostlanders.com, by the way. So I know what that is. You know what I'm saying? So mm-hmm. I draw that different. It's got brighter colors. It's got all the color wheel in it. And it's fun, and it's consumable by everyone. Right. Now, not that MOUNTIES vs. Werewolves won't be, but it's got its audience, and it's gonna be a gritty, cool thing that really will be transferable. And Larry using his knowledge of cinema, and me as well, having that knowledge of cinema and working with those types of people and stuff. I'm going to make sure that as an art director and a creative director, following Larry's voice, and then with me controlling the understanding of how that works and to put the production together, that's what this is going to be art-wise. It's going to be everything that it should be, but more importantly, everything that it can be.
Well, I'd be remiss to say congratulations to Mr. Hama, because the G.I. Joe Kickstarter he was just a part of pretty much revolutionized Kickstarters as far as people's excitement and the money it made. And this project sounds like it's just going to be as exciting. It's two of the best in the business working together. And like you said, fans can look forward to checking out the Kickstarter links soon, I assume.
Oh yeah. The Kickstarter links, the pre-launch is up.
Okay.
And like I said, you can go to Kickstarter. I don't, I'll give you the links to post and such. Right. But they're posted. And if you go to Larry, been faking it all my life, Hama, right? I think I got that right, Larry, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
It's not a joke. Like I explained before, I really don't know how to do anything. I actually it all my life. I have no idea how to actually draw.
Here's what it is. I always say the same thing about myself, and I always go, "Oh, this sucks," and blah blah blah. And then everyone goes, "Oh my gosh, you did the best ROM I ever saw," and I'm like, "Whoa, what?" And what it is that Larry and I, that's one thing about Larry and I, come from that same mold, is where we jump right in. So we don't even know whether we don't even take the time to wonder whether we're good enough. I think if we stop to ask ourselves if we are good, I think we wouldn't be able to be so open to create so many new things in the way that we do.
Now, it's more than that. It's the very fact that, if you don't think to yourself that you're the best thing since sliced bread, you have no impetus to get any better, and some of the crappiest artists and writers I've seen, have overtly high opinions of their own talents. I'm always like, oh my God, it's like, but the guys that I know and the girls that I know who are plagued with self-doubt get better all the time, because they look at stuff they did 2 weeks ago and they're not happy with it. You know, once you start getting happy with stuff you did 10 years ago, you're over. You know?
He's right.
That's a
He's right.
really simple hurdle to get over. You know?
Well,
Yeah,
Most people
Larry's
don't
right.
want to.
Yeah, Larry's 100% right on that. Very articulated very well. And I think uh, anyway, back to Manny's vs. Werewolves. Go see Manny's vs. Werewolves campaign at Larry's fan page. And if you happen to be lucky enough to be friends with him on his regular page as well, see it there. You can go to Instagram, and there's the Manny's vs. Werewolves on Instagram. But also check out Good Alien. Good Alien is a company. It's a company I started, and I'm doing some things with Hollywood and stuff like that. It takes a long time to get those things going, but they happen. I know the people. I know a lot of people. I happen to, for some reason, I always just walk into a room and then I'm talking with the head martial artist and then hanging out, and then I'm part of that group. And then I'm walking somewhere and I go to the store and I'm talking to a movie producer. And then I just don't know how it happens, but it does happen. And this has happened. And, so it takes time to work on them because I usually have like 5 or 6 or 7 things in the works. Because what I like to do is some guys like to put out a book every month. I'm not that guy. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is not worried. I wouldn't say worried. What I'd like to do is I want to have 5 projects, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects all going at the same time. Then you go get them all into production, get them all done, and then you got all these things consecutively coming out. I took a picture, in 2017 or 2018. It was me, John Byrne, and Chris Ryall. And at the time, I was working with another company, a comic company, PKMM, and I was working with IDW, and I was working with Storm King, and I was also doing other work as well. But I did them all at the same time, and then a bunch of stuff comes out at the same time. It's like that in Hollywood. A lot of actors do that. They'll go and do 4 films in a row, and they'll shoot, and then they'll take a break. Those are in post production, and the actors chilling out, setting up the next things for a few months, or 6 months, or even a year, and then they go into it. But the one thing I try to do is quality. Try to make everything quality, and that's why we have guys like Sal Buscema, Kelly Jones, and Scott Hanna, and Mark Spears. I don't know if you saw his paint. He's great painter. And all these people. And J.K. Woodward with Star Trek is known for that. But it's all going to be quality. It has to be quality. And so, Manny's vs. Werewolves. Go to the page, share it. If you want to see what we're going to produce and what we're going to do with it, again, it's going to be a series, and it's going to be an entire world we're going to put out there. So it'll always have a place to continue to grow. But we have a lot of intention. As someone who's worked in the toy industry as well for many years on many different things, and has work in Disney World now and in stores everywhere right now and everything. I produce full productions with it, full properties. So you can bet that Manny's vs. Werewolves will be looked at as a television series. It'll be looked at as a film. It'll be looked at as an action figure line. It'll be statues. As a matter of fact, I might as well just show them while I have it right here. Here's a bust I sculpted of our main Mountie. And then right here, I think you guys can see it from there, but I'll bring it forward. Here's a werewolf bust that's going to be part of our campaign. I sculpted that. Actually, might as well show you like Lost Landers figures. It's going to be Lost Landers. So like I not only can get them done, I have done this stuff for 30 years in all those things. So if everybody gets on board, and Larry and I can really get in there and dig in, we're proven guys in the industry for over 30 years. And Larry, I don't even was 50 years for Larry. So something like that. 56, 52? I don't know. But we're going to make it an incredibly fun, awesome, cool looking thing for people to just get involved in. And as a collector myself, I love collecting comics, toys, action figures, sculptures, busts, um, posters. I have all that stuff when I like something. This is going to be one of those things that you can go and you can like and enjoy liking, because we'll continue to do it. So spread the word. Spread the word. Mounties versus werewolves.
And we're back. So, what did you guys think of that interview? To be completely honest with you, we didn't think it would happen. Not until he actually signed on did we think that we would actually be talking to Larry Hama. It was an absolute pleasure getting to talk to him. We hope to have him back again in the future to discuss, in depth his career and everything he's done over the years. But it was great to talk to him. I mean, Oren, Mike, and I have been wanting to talk to him for probably a good 2 years now or more. And he's a bit elusive when it comes to doing interviews. I mean, how many times do you want to answer questions about Cobra Commander? I mean, I could do it all day, but I have no involvement in it. That being said, look, we got a chance to talk to Larry Hama in addition to Guy Dorian together. I mean, Guy has done so much in his career, so many irons in the fire. He's involved with, action figures and art and, movies and things of that nature. So, he brings all that knowledge to the table in addition to his enthusiasm for what he's doing, clearly. And it shows. So we're looking forward to checking this out. So I encourage everyone to go check out Kickstarter. Search up Mounties vs. Werewolves by Larry Hama and Guy Dorian. The link will be in the show notes for this episode. So I encourage everyone to go check it out. Be sure to check out our next episode this coming Friday. And we'll see you next time.